Commencing virtuous mission now.
The head of the CIA has finally given us the green light for the virtuous mission.
Virtual mission?
No, the virtuous mission. The future of our Fox unit depends on it. If it succeeds, we'll be officially organized into a unit.
Virtuous mission? Sounds like some kind of initiation ritual.
Don't get cocky, this isn't a training op.
Metal Gear Solid 3 perfectly sets itself in the middle of the Cold War, an era defined by the world wars known as the Wars to End All Wars, East and West.
East and West. This marked the beginning of the era called the Cold War.
The world was divided with superpowers such as the Soviet Union and America taking center stage in this scene, after turbulent times with the Cuban Missile Crisis that could have seen the world in a nuclear crisis.
No kidding. Those 13 days starting October 15th, 1962, were probably the closest we ever came to all-out nuclear war. The Russians deployed nuclear missiles to Cuba. America responded with a naval blockade. Then Russia shot down an American spy plane. I was still a teenager back then, but I remember what it felt like to be one step away from nuclear war. The adults were freaking out.
If it wasn't for the Cuban Missile Crisis, there might never have been an Operation Snake Eater. And
what's the matter, Snake? It's not like you to get all hypothetical.
I guess not. It was the reassessment after the missile crisis that paved the way for the hotline between Moscow and Washington, and also for détente. That's irony for you.
Warfare had changed, fought through information and spies, and proxies. Espionage and intelligence gathering is a huge component in the series of Metal Gear Solid, the era defining the purpose of each objective at hand that differs in approach.
Neither enemy nor friend. Just a messenger from the La Lelo.
Big Boss was more direct in infiltration methods that required militaristic aspects of remaining unseen, all whilst conferring with others to extract knowledge. He was on a need-to-know basis with intel from his superiors, unfortunately lacking any clarity of the true meaning behind his objective that was planned at the very beginning until plans took a turn for the assassination of the Cobra unit and the boss. Aside from at first in Virtuous Mission rescuing Dr. Sokolov, rocket and weapons scientist, who clearly mirrors German scientists that were recovered after the World Wars for both Soviet and the States, all of which in their competitive race at the time to build the ultimate nation. Wernher von Braun is a real-world Sokolov. He was Germany's leading rocket scientist during World War II and responsible for developing the V-2 rockets for the Nazis, the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile.
But it was not to be. The space race between America and Russia became the prey of politicians. The space race and the arms race are one and the same. Missiles, rockets, what's the difference? Scientists are always being used.
At the end of the war, both the US and the Soviets raced to capture Nazi scientists before the other side could. Under Operation Paperclip in 1945 to 1959, von Braun and his team were secretly relocated to the United States, where they went on to design rockets for NASA, most famously the Saturn V, which took Apollo to the moon. This mirrors Sokolov's struggle of trying to make it to the West for somewhat of a better life, realising that he'd only just be used for research no matter where he goes. All with Snake's part in this operation is to ultimately retrieve him and bring him to the other side of the Iron Curtain for the US, and later come to terms with an ugly reality of his mission.
Khrushchev has abandoned me. I cannot return to my country. I would most certainly be sent to the gulags.
What about the US?
Yes, I once thought of that. My family's waiting for me there. But even if I fled to the United States, I would once again find myself creating weapons of mass murder. In the end, it doesn't matter where I go. I am still a weapons scientist.
The boss is built from fragments of this real-world history during the wars. The lives of women who fought, led, and share a similar story. Yevdokia Savali is the only woman in history to command an all-male platoon in the Red Army. Her men called her Mother, similar to the boss renowned by the Russians as Voyevoda, known as the Mother of Special Forces.
Her name is the Boss. She's a living legend. During World War II, she was the one who led us to victory in that war. In Russia, you know her as Voyevoda.
You mean the boss? The mother of your special forces?
Yes, that's the one.
Or rather, the true definition in early Slavic, the military leader in battle. Just like Yevdokia, she was renowned and known for her leadership and leading her platoon. All men. Showcased as the Cobra unit, echoing the same tactical brilliance and fearlessness under her fire. The boss, with all her space exploits, also mirrors a woman known as Valentina Tereshkova. In 1963, she became the first woman in space piloting Vostok 6, a national icon as she symbolized the Soviet ideal of the fearless pioneer. Loyal to her nation, serving humanity through courage and sacrifice. Just as the boss's patriotic acts and loyalty to the US, her role becomes unclear to the audience at first until we realize her true objectives.
The higher-ups at NASA were impressed with her talents. They took to calling her the 8th astronaut, the Mercury Lady. The photo I sent you was taken around that time. I suppose maybe they were planning to use it as propaganda, the world's first female astronaut.
Colonel Volgin, who mirrors the hardline military nationalist faction within the Soviet Union. Men loyal not just to the ideology but to power through fear that Stalin once held so fiercely. Historically, this current was embodied by figures who opposed Nikita Khrushchev's de-Stalinization, and all of his limited cooperation with the West during the Cold War IV of the late 1950s and the early 60s. After Stalin's death in 1953, thanks to Skullface, as we learn in MGS3's, Khrushchev rose to power and started dismantling much of Stalin's cult of personality. He spoke openly about the purges, released political prisoners, and tried to redirect the Soviet resources towards consumer goods and space technology instead of sheer militarization. But not everyone was on board. Inside the Kremlin and the military-industrial complex, a reactionary bloc formed. Figures like Georgy Zhukov, Vyachaz Molotov, and eventually Leonid Brezhnev of the Brezhnev faction. As we learn, Volgin becomes affiliated with this said group.
With this money and the support of Brezhnev and his allies, I built this fortress of Groznygrad and Kranin's research facility.
They saw Khrushchev as weak, too willing to compromise with the US, especially after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Volgin sits between Berer's ruthlessness and Brezhnev's cold pragmatism, both products of the same ideological soil to restore the Soviets' former glory. He contains a mass of funds, as we know in the series, that drove the Patriots, as the
philosopher's legacy.
The boss is tasked by her superiors to retrieve it and bring it back to the US, and in doing so, she bought Volgin's trust with 2 miniature nuclear shells as a little token of her initiation. In the late 1950s and the early 60s, the US military actually developed one of the most reckless weapons of the Cold War, as it was known as the M28-M29 Davy Crockett, a portable battlefield deployed nuclear launcher, and it fired a W-54 warhead, a nuke small enough to be fired from a tripod or even a jeep. Its blast yield was absurdly low, roughly to 10 to 20 tons of TNT, but that's still enough to wipe out several city blocks. The Davy Crockett was meant for frontline use in the case of a Soviet invasion of Europe, a tactical nuclear deterrent that could be fired by any small infantry team. But the catch was it had a blast radius larger than its effective firing range, meaning if you used it, you were likely nuking yourself too.
The Davy Crockett's that the boss took with her when she defected are mortars that fire nuclear warheads. They're named after Davy Crockett, the hero who died defending the Alamo in the Texan War of Independence. That's right. The warheads are equivalent to between 10 and 20 tons of TNT, Every building within 150 yards of the hypocenter is completely obliterated. But the warheads the boss had with her were some kind of experimental super bomb, so they're actually even more powerful than that. I don't even want to think about what would happen if she used it again. Snake, you know what you have to do.
What's that?
The phrase "Remember the Alamo," spoken by Volgin and Skullface,
Remember the Alamo.
Remember the Alamo.
comes from the 19th century American war cry during the Texas Revolution in 1836 after the fall of the Alamo, a battle where a small Texan garrison was wiped out by Mexican forces. The phrase becomes a symbol of vengeance, pride, and martyrdom. "I shall never surrender or retreat," as quoted. It perfectly aligns with the so-called antagonists of the game. In MGS3, Volgin weaponizes the same spirit. He parrots "Remember the Alamo" out of mockery, twisting an American phrase of a patriotic revenge into his own fascist worldview. Kojima's way of showing that national myths, east or west, are interchangeable once they're hollowed out by ideology. And with this, Volgin boldly fires the missile at a Soviet research facility that frames the US for being responsible, or rather the boss. In turn, the Soviets demand the death of both the boss and Volgin to prove America's innocence in the ordeal.
To put it simply, in order to avoid a full-scale nuclear conflict, we have to prove that America was not involved in that explosion.
And eliminating the boss ourselves will prove America's innocence?
Right.
The US didn't anticipate Volgin's actions, so the boss was the ultimate sacrifice she was willingly accepted in order to avoid the world war that could ensue from this disaster. And her goals were to retrieve the massive funds, while she must accept her fate in the hand of her most beloved disciple, Big Boss. Then we have Adamska.
My name is Adamska.
This man had many names and just might be the best spy to have ever lived. And of course he shares similarities with a real-world GRU general known as Dmitri Polyakov, who is aligned with both the GRU and the CIA. It was known that he had high clearance and used that across to photograph and extract top-secret documents, classified military strategy journals and lists of technology programs. He used indigenous dead drop techniques, hollow stones in meadows, tiny burst transmitters hidden in his pocket, film that would only develop with special chemicals, so if intercepted, it would appear blank. Whilst he remained disguised as the intelligence flaw by using his official status, letting him operate inside the system while sending secrets outward. Polyakov's ability to play the system from within, maintain cover, while leaking high-value info, clearly resembles Ocelot's layered loyalties and complicated role. As we've seen throughout the series, Ocelot perfectly orchestrates events as a Patriot spy, to ultimately destroy the organisation from where it began with the Philosophers, who serves as a key antagonist of the game. His skills far surpassed many, not just within intelligence but within skill too, closely on par with Big Boss.
I picked up a few new moves.
Ocelot briefly worked for NSA as a codebreaker, as we're told, under the code name of Adam, but he also had another colleague, as well as himself, who defected to the Soviet Union in September in 1960 under the name of Eva. Eva, as we know in the game, is completely unrelated to the spy that defected with Adam, but she uses it as a cover to work alongside Snake to give him the impression that she is aligned with Ocelot.
The philosophers still exist in China, too. You see, my mission was to find out where Volgin was hiding the philosopher's legacy and steal it. So I infiltrated his base as a KGB spy. The two NSA codebreakers who defected in 1960 were actually both men.
However, a seemingly contradictory account had the youth of Ocelot taken and raised by the Spetsnaz GRU and Volgin earlier on before the operation we come to understand, and before the boss's affiliation, in the immediate aftermath of World War II. With his heritage as the son of the legendary hero The Boss, he was given preferential treatment within the organisation, promoted to the rank of Major at a very young age, and given command of the unit we know as the Ocelot unit.
I heard from the Colonel that he's been given special treatment.
Special treatment?
Yeah, he's the son of some legendary hero or something.
No wonder he seems to have the right stuff.
Of course, his main objective was to retrieve the legacy as well, half of which he used for his own goals, as we understand, and gave the other half to the CIA director. Throughout the majority of the series, as we know, he covertly and masterfully navigated the politics of covert operations while psychologically and socially controlling the narrative that ultimately led his way. Eva makes her way into the scene, working as a spy for the Chinese philosophers. She, along with several other children across the world, were taken by the philosophers and raised in a joint US-Soviet-Chinese facility at the time, receiving spy training at one of the philosophers' charm schools.
I too am one of the philosophers. I'm an agent of the philosophers, a graduate of one of their charm schools. I was raised in a joint US-Soviet-Chinese facility to become a sleeper agent. This was before the war. Back then, they were collecting children from all over the world. As a result, I'm indistinguishable from a native-born American. So it didn't surprise me when you and Volgin couldn't tell the difference. But she knew right from the beginning. She knew because before the war, she was at one of the philosopher's schools too, as an instructor.
She becomes a sleeper agent, posing as a KGB operative under the name Tatiana. She was sent to Selenoyarsk to oversee the development of Sokolov's Shagohod and retrieve data on the Shagohod and retrieve the philosopher's legacy, using her female charms as a spy. She posed as Sokolov's lover and Volgin's in order to get closer to her mission objectives in a more personal way. All of this while supplying Snake with proxy information that he needs to know to help his mission succeed along with hers, but ultimately use Snake to try and accomplish her goals. In real-world history, there has been several female spies, although not exactly the same as Eva, who works for the Chinese intelligence in MGS3. There was someone called Xie Pi, who was an operative spy who mirrors exactly Eva's same goals. Whilst he wasn't a female, he posed as one for his job as a Peking opera singer, and would continue his role in the spy business in female roles. He even convinced a French diplomat he was a woman, entering a long relationship to extract embassy secrets. You could say he's just like Eva, who used personal intimacy as a form of cover, maintaining the illusion, using more of an emotional layer to other counterparts in the business who might approach things differently in the spy business. Female spies are known for being some of the most deadliest because of their charms and womanliness that often places some of the most powerful men in vulnerable positions.
Snake, I found out what I could about your Tanya. Just as I thought, she's apparently Sokolov's lover. When Sokolov was taken away from his research facility, she was taken along with him.
So she's been with him since he was at the research facility?
That's what it looks like.
Collectively, all of the above works in tandem in this spy epic that, unlike many we've seen in media. Kojima cohesively tells a multi-layered and complex social dynamic between these characters that you realise that whilst the characters are mostly out for their own goals, they build relationships predominantly around the convenience as associates for the mission, that they become attached and start to develop personal feelings, especially for Snake, which, as the boss explains in the early part of the Virtuous mission, is one of the biggest mistakes you can make, especially in the world of espionage. Personal feelings shouldn't get in the way of a mission.
Having personal feelings about your comrades is one of the worst sins you can commit. Politics determine who you face on the battlefield. And politics are a living thing. They change along with the times. Yesterday's good might be tomorrow's evil.
Is that why you abandoned me?
No, it had nothing to do with you. I already told you, Jack. I was on a top-secret mission. A soldier has to follow whatever orders he's given. It's not his place to question why.
But somehow, through each character's skill and abilities, they ultimately foil Volgin and his faction's plans to revive Soviet Russia, even if one's left empty-handed, whilst the other leaves with the gold, or sadly sacrificed in the name of averting all-out disaster, whilst the main protagonist is all of the above in a collective emotion of the entire truth of the mission that ultimately leaves the audience broken.
Major, why did the boss defect?
I don't know, but I will tell you this. America is all too eager to get rid of her.
What do you mean?
She knows too many of our secrets. If she were to relay all the top-secret information she knows to the Soviet bloc, it would put us at a severe disadvantage. It might even lead to the downfall of the West. Even if we survive, the boss is still too much of a hero to us. With her in the Soviet camp, we'd suffer a fatal loss of morale at home. There are even whispers that some of the less stalwart elements of the military might follow her example and defect themselves. I assume you're aware that since your last mission, several key figures within the CIA have been placed under house arrest.
Yeah.
The loss of the boss has been a painful one indeed.
What about you?
Me? I still can't believe it. As a comrade, I would have placed my trust in her before my own family.
The brilliance within MGS3's narrative shows that not everything goes to plan, and sometimes all you can do is improvise and think spontaneously. The ways in which these characters help Snake complete his mission, whilst he is hands-on doing the impossible, the others ensure somewhat of a source of intel for Snake whilst ultimately trying not to break character as a spy and not losing face in the most intense moments.
But I can't get too close to your cell. You'll have to figure a way out of there yourself. I'll be in touch.
Many slip-ups were made in Operation Snake Eater, some more than others. Whilst we know it's thanks to everyone's efforts to ultimately helping Snake complete his mission, albeit in ways that were poor foresight or downright ego battles, they showed the flawed elements of these agents within Kojima's writing that makes them feel more human rather than just placeholders. Ultimately, Ocelot was the perfectionist as a spy. Out of the rest, if you ask me, because he rarely made many mistakes to compromise himself. He first meets Snake trying to retrieve Sokolov and mistakes Snake for being the boss, which alludes at this time he hasn't become familiar with the Mother of Special Forces as of yet. He fails, as in terms of combat, because Big Boss always had the upper hand. Objectively speaking, Snake's mission as an operative goes smoothly until the boss arrives brandishing the Davy Crockett as a gift for her way into Volgin's ranks. She throws Snake off a bridge that could have potentially have killed him, and most certainly would have, showing the boss's ruthless tactics, if not careless at this point. If Snake did die, it wouldn't stop her from completing her mission. However, because of Volgin firing the missiles, America would still need to prove its innocence. With no skilled agent like Snake at hand, the world would most likely be plunged into World War III unless the boss retrieved the legacy with the help of the Cobra unit and was executed by the US later to clear its name. But that's another story. The boss knew Snake would survive the fall, but it was as careless as a move could be in terms of securing the mission. When Operation Snake Eater proceeds is when Snake meets Eva for the first time. At this time, before the operation, Ocelot was ordered by the CIA to aid Snake, in which the boss, the Cobra unit, and the threat of the Shagohod were to be eliminated, which also retrieving the Philosopher's legacy was his goal. Returning to Razvet, Ocelot intended to make contact with Snake, but the supposed KGB spy Eva reached him first, more than likely overhearing intel from somewhere or because of her handlers, the Chinese government. At some point we see Snake take advice from paramedic and Eva about getting some rest, and sure, he really needed it, but in a crucial moment like this, meeting an unknown spy on the opposite team is a bit of a careless move. Big Boss didn't know who to trust as he claimed, but he fell for Eva's charms, and in doing so potentially could have been killed, and he missed the opportunity to overhear Eva's secret radio call to the Chinese government. Snake might have been a little too trusting, but ultimately the stakes were too low at this point for anything desperate to happen in the name of completing both of their missions. Ocelot, or rather Adam, his real name, was meant to meet with Snake to discuss the mission objective as instructed by the CIA. It's claimed that Ocelot arrived late, but knowing his personality it seems more than unlikely. He came at the right time, as he already had suspicions before anyone else that Eva was a spy as the guise of Tatiana.
What are we going to do with the girl?
He didn't come alone, bringing the Ocelot unit, purposely to flush out Eva in hopes he could catch her red-handed, disguise and all. Eva didn't foresee that the early arrival was actually a mistake on her part. It's ironic how a GRU unit was waiting and lying in ambush. At some point, Ocelot grabs Eva at knife point whilst taking in her scent, and feeling around with the hardware.
What? A female spy? This bitch is wearing perfume.
A very smart methodical tactic that, can go overlooked, but something we see Volgin do to determine if the person they may be familiar with could potentially be an imposter. Thankfully, Eva isn't wearing her KGB uniform. That would have blown her cover immediately.
Ocelot, unlike Volgin, was unclear of Eva's anatomy,
which didn't fully blow her cover at this point. But what's interesting, even as a young guy, Ocelot way exceeds even people higher in experience and knowledge. His executions does have its flaws as he fails once again in his combat knowledge, unlike Snake, who is the master of. Ocelot's biggest mistake was using a gun with engravings, with no tactical advantage whatsoever. His gun jams, and Eva breaks free. This could have easily have cost him the mission, but mostly his life, with Snake acting as the catalyst once again that keeps both Ocelot and Eva alive in their little espionage war. Eva then has to make it back before Ocelot to get into character in case Volgin gets suspicious.
Don't!
Why?
He's still young.
You'll regret stopping me. Damn it! I've got to get back before he does!
At some point, Snake reaches the warehouse. Sokolov is reluctant to finish building the Shagohod for Volgin. In turn, he punishes Eva for his lack of compliance, but she still stays in character as Sokolov's lover. Ocelot at this point hasn't made Tatiana for a spy, yet instead puts on a sadistic revolver roulette show to intimidate Sokolov. Showing his level of restrained maturity is still not as polished yet as we see later in the series.
You will learn how a real soldier fights. You will forget everything Hollywood taught you.
But by doing this, he displays to Volgin the kind of unhinged and larger-than-life people he tends to have on his team. Volgin gladly watches Ocelot as if it was some sick show, placing Sokolov in pure submission and fear to complete the project. The boss just so happens to conveniently show up after hearing the blank rounds fired, almost like she was ready for when the bullets placements were going to be fired from the chamber. She just so happens to step in at the right time. Perhaps Ocelot made a mistake by getting carried away, or it was all part of the plan. Ocelot and the boss are in perfect character at this point, as she subtly, if you see the cutscene, nods at him in a suggestive way that hints at their planned dynamics of what they're trying to achieve in the mission, hinting at the idea that they've discussed behind the scenes what needs to play out.
You'd better stay in line from now on. The Cobras will take care of him.
Fooling Volgin, who is amused at pure pleasure at this point, it's here as well that we see Eva takes a hint that Volgin is open to her romantically, which gives her the opportunity to get closer. At some point, Snake sneaks his way into Granny's research facility, with of course the help of Eva, who out of everyone else actually assists Snake the most, building a trust with him so that later she might be able to take advantage. A very smart spy move. extracting easy information from weapons scientist himself, Granin. Snake takes advantage of his drunken state and bitter resentment towards Volgin for not using him for his great Metal Gear designs that would later go on to shape the series.
It is a revolutionary mobile nuclear missile system. A bipedal tank.
A bipedal tank?
After all, a Metal Gear doesn't need shoes or rockets, but legs. Legs that allow it to go anywhere.
Legs. Legs that allow it to go anywhere. Just as when humans learn to walk upright. That is the real revolution in weaponry, don't you agree?
Out of spite, Granin reveals everything about Volgin and his plans, as well as the Philosopher's legacy.
The Colonel has inherited their immense legacy. Volgin's father was in charge of the Philosopher's money laundering activities. In the confusion of the war, they somehow ended up with their treasure. And Volgin inherited that treasure illegally.
All of which would ultimately cause Granin's demise for talking too much. Be like Venom and give people nothing.
Find the source of that transmission, boss. Find our man.
Once Snake reaches the mountains, Eva and Snake begin to develop romantic feelings for one another. But Snake is hesitant, remembering he can't lose sight of the mission. It's here we see Eva's dedication to being a spy, covered in scars not just from Volgin's sadistic ways, but others throughout her missions. It's here once again she relies on Snake's military infiltration skills with the necessary information she gives him in regarding the impregnable fortress that is Groznygrad, and the Shagohod Metal Gear it houses.
Do you know where exactly in Groznygrad Sokolov is located?
He's in the heart of the fortress, the weapons lab. The weapons lab is divided into 3 wings. There's the East Wing, which houses the research facilities. Then there's the main wing where the weapons are assembled. That's where the Shagohod is.
Snake only has one problem. In the heart of the Lion's Den, Sokolov is heavily guarded, and once again he must rely on disguise technique methods, albeit with such short notice. Snake was already at a loss because he knew practically nothing about Rykov to imitate him, and these are the things that betray an imposter, as real-world espionage has shown us.
Eva, what kind of guy is Rykov?
He's Volgin's precious pet.
Anything else?
He's got a handsome face.
Is that what you really think?
No, I'm just being objective. I'm not interested in people who aren't interested in me.
I was hoping to get some useful info for becoming him.
He seems mild-mannered, but the kind of guy who would sit in his room and admire his bug collection.
That still doesn't help me much. Anything more?
I really don't know, Snake. Can't you just observe him and copy him yourself?
Certain mannerisms can give you away. A thumb tap, or a way of holding a cigarette, a salute performed too crisply or too lazily. Micro-rituals such as which hand lights a cigarette, how someone polishes boots, how they hold paperwork. There's a great moment like this in Quentin Tarantino's movie Inglourious Bastards. There's a tense scene set in the basement tavern where British officer L.T. Hickox poses as a Nazi officer, meeting with German soldiers whilst undercover. Everything about his disguise looks flawless. The uniform, he nails the accent, the confidence, but it unravels over a tiny cultural ritual. When he orders 3 glasses of whiskey, he raises 3 fingers the English way. The index, the middle, and the ring finger. A real German would count thumb, index, and middle. And that subtle gesture is something no amount of language training would teach. Exposes him. The German major at the table, Hellstrom, instantly recognises the inconsistency. He keeps smiling, keeps talking, but the room's air shifts and you can feel it. The disguise is dead and they're just pretending otherwise until guns come out. This closely mirrors real-world events during the Great Wars, with some disguises being more successful than others, like Operation Grief in World War II, where German commandos tried to pass as Allied troops. Many failed not because of uniforms but because of the language slips and wrong jargon, or unfamiliarity with units' routines, small behavioural mismatches that triggered suspicion. And in polar opposite, Eli Cohen, Successful, by contrast, Cohen succeeded because he lived his cover for years, perfecting accents, habits, local jokes. The practice and the patience is that the inverse of a quick costume couldn't possibly do. Snake's race against the clock gave him little to no time, and already highly paranoid and rightfully suspicious Colonel Volgin.
This is war, Major. A Cold War, fought with information and espionage. We must root out spies wherever they hide. It is kill or be killed. Potential threats must be weeded out. Your feelings are a menace to the unity of our organization. Someone is guiding the enemy's hand. A single man can only accomplish so much. Make no mistake, there is a spy among us.
But casting suspicion on our own comrades.
The C3 explosives have been stolen.
You think it was the American?
If we take it back before the incredible torture sequence, which is cinema and storytelling at its finest, something that blurs the line between movie and video games is Eva's reckless attempt at trying to make it back to Groznygrad. She made one small little error on her boots, signs of motorcycle use. Instantly, Ocelot at this point definitely knew Tatiana was a spy, and probably even did at the start. Interestingly, he plays along whilst teasing the idea to Eva he knows her game, putting the crossbow bolt to her neck and comically telling her to make sure that she polishes her boots.
Nice boots. Make sure you polish them up properly.
The boss in the affair acts with pure confidence, confirming what she already is aware of, and if we look closely we can see that she arrives into the scene with Eva, implying that these two have already conferred. Snake now has more than shown that he has indeed carried an emotion into battle at this point. Ironically, the ones he's defeating along the way combine together. In this honourable warrior's ritual, both the boss and Ocelot use this to test Snake to see if he's truly capable of completing the mission. In a realistic standpoint, this wouldn't work. In reality, the boss and Ocelot putting Snake to the test is too risky, considering they're actually working together for the US government. As brilliant as the social dynamic of the story unfolds, mostly part of this reason is because it's etched into its gameplay. But when you look at the social dynamics, neither characters can lose sight of their positions working for Volgin. Just before Snake gets tortured, his cover is blown after what we touched up on in the latter. The boss intervenes to strengthen her trust for Volgin, trying to take control of a messy situation. Revealing Snake's identity, she completely dissembles the two whilst keeping Volgin busy. At this point, Ocelot isn't too far behind. Aside from them being mother and son, they both work for the US government, and their interest, albeit Ocelot's loyalties aren't to any country, but rather his mother's and Big Boss's will, and of course for his own motives. The boss leaves the room, fearing the worst for Snake, but knowing she cannot compromise the mission for what she cares for. Snake receives a beating that would probably kill most men. You can tell Ocelot is ready to intervene, but the boss takes control of the scene, and he obeys his mother's commands to hold fire. Snake, now in the torture room, undergoes extensive shock torture and questioning. Ocelot watches on in disgust and appreciation for torture, something that he is inspired to adopt later in his life as we see. He remains in character the entire time, but you can tell at one point he grabs his bullet around his neck, contemplating if he should shoot Volgin to save Big Boss, who he has come greatly to respect, and more than understands his close connection to his time with his mother, who has more than likely briefed Ocelot on their time together. Volgin's punishment gets worse as the boss dismantles his fragile ego, which she does on purpose. That Snake has been trained not to break, a smart technique she uses in hopes that Volgin will keep slipping essential information out as he reacts more violently to her statement.
Admit it! We're after the location of the legacy! The secret fund established by the three great powers during the 2 world wars. That's what you're looking for, isn't it? $100 billion, divided up and hidden all over the world.
The boss's smart but subtle technique, without personally offending Volgin, is he reveals the exact location of the mass of funds, the Philosopher's Legacy.
No matter. The Philosopher's Legacy is safely in my possession, in the underground vault of Groznygrad.
Either he is really stupid, or every spy in his circle had systematically convinced him enough of their loyalties to be confident to reveal the location. It's at this point, given on the cinematography and the camera placements between characters, you get a good understanding that aside from Ocelot and the boss, Eva and the boss have an understanding too. Or rather, a beneficial relationship, as they both directly look at each other when Volgin mentions the location of the legacy. We have to remember both the boss and Eva are familiar with their time together in the Philosopher's Charm schools. The boss was associated with these schools, but as an instructor of a figure or an influence, but not directly involved in Eva's specific training. But she understood all the tricks of the trade, and represents the ideological figure Eva was trained to become, hence giving her the edge over Eva. At some point, a transmitter falls from Snake, another unknown factor, placed from the boss's first encounter with Snake at the start of Operation Snake Eater. Whilst everyone in question denies accountability, the boss straight up owns up to her genius plan, or perhaps even a flaw, that casts Volgin's suspicion of an insider. She claimed the transmitter was to keep track of Snake's movements so the Cobras could ambush him, covertly directing the attention away from herself and placing it on her former unit. The boss at this point had shown her true intentions. The true meaning of the transmitter was a way to keep track of her beloved disciple's progress, contradicting herself to her duties and the mission as she explained in the latter, for a love only a mother could have for one of her own. This is the brilliance of this scene, ironically the theme of what Kojima calls Metal Gear Solid 3, showing how the unpredictability can change the whole scene. Volgin tosses the transmitter carelessly, too concerned about the clear indication that the boss and Snake may be in league together. Unbeknownst to Volgin, Ocelot actually catches the transmitter with a smug of approval, knowing he can use it for his own gain. But now, in order for the boss to regain Volgin's trust to prove her loyalties, she is tasked to cut out Snake's eye.
Ruin him, just as he did the Cobras.
Remaining in character the entire time. If it wasn't for Eva intervening, the boss may have just followed Volgin's commands to keep face. But in doing so, Eva placed the spotlight on herself.
Why are you protecting him? That smell. Tatiana, you're the spy.
What are you talking about?
Of course, being the ruthless agent Ocelot is, he took complete advantage of the situation. He obviously wonders why Eva's trying to protect Snake, something that he sees happen earlier on in Razvet, which makes him put the two together. He knows Eva is more than likely working for the Chinese philosophers at this point, something he knew way back, seeing the Type Chinese 17 pistol pouch Eva carried. He doubles down, throwing the attention to Eva, throwing her under the bus. Using scent and touch, he confirms what he already suspected. But out of his own amusement, he decides to test her, knowing that one bullet could most certainly kill her. But this was a perfect spontaneous move from Ocelot to completely avert the attention from the boss and place it on Eva, who is against them since she's working for the Chinese. Taking out Eva would eliminate her chance at trying to steal the legacy for her own goals. But of course, Big Boss intervenes, saving Eva, acting as the catalyst as I mentioned before. Volgin leaves in all of the confusion whilst the boss and Ocelot encourage Snake's escape. Ocelot, whilst closely respecting Big Boss, was cunning enough to be the spy and play his own game against Snake. to test the legend at work by trying to compete in deep warrior camaraderie. Ultimately, whilst it appears everyone is working together, in the game of espionage in the field, you watch both sides, the one who is aiming at you and the one who is standing beside you, friend or foe. At some point, Eva rendezvous with Snake at the waterfall after the escape plan in the sewers completely fails, which tells me Ocelot had more info over Eva than she even noticed, resupplying Snake with his confiscated equipment as well as the C3 that she had stolen earlier, and as well as the microfilm containing the Shagohod's data that Sokolov gave her.
Some C3 ought to be enough to blow the entire hangar to smithereens.
C3? You mean that cutting-edge plastic explosive?
It could be molded into any shape. The bomb of the future.
Where can I get it?
There was some in the armory here, but it's gone now. It was stolen by a female spy who was here a minute ago.
Eva?
No, that's not her name. Her name is Tatiana. She made her way in here by becoming Volgin's lover.
I thought she was your lover.
Mine? Oh no, she is Volgin's lover. She said that Khrushchev sent her.
What did you just give her?
All of the experimental data for the Shagohod.
Which would be completely useless in the decades to come, considering the grand schematics that Granin created that he'd passed over to Huey Emmerich. And of course she'd give this to Snake, the C3 of course, to aid him in destroying the Shagohod. She would also plant some of the C3 on a nearby rail bridge later on to aid in their escape. Snake successfully places the explosives on the Shagohod until he's caught, along with Eva, who is carelessly caught trying to steal the Legacy. The boss at this point had devised a plan already to ensure the Legacy would be in the right hands. The boss smartly realises whilst Eva's intentions ultimately are to retrieve the Legacy for the Chinese, she understands she has good intentions to help Snake return from his mission, and in favour for supporting her during the torture sequence that could have blown the boss's cover. It's more than likely the boss helped Eva set up the escape plan to begin with. Eva gains a great deal of admiration, feeling that she owes the boss her life for the sacrifice she didn't just make for her country, but herself as well, considering Volgin was going to eliminate her.
Why did she open her heart to me like that? At the time, I couldn't understand it. But now, I think I do. Snake. She wanted you to know the truth. She chose me to tell you. That's why she saved my life. I've lied to you so many times, but not this time. My orders from the government were to obtain the Legacy and to eliminate everyone who knew the truth about what happened. In other words, I'm supposed to kill you.
Volgin foolishly entrusts the boss with the Legacy, focusing his attention on Snake. Later, Snake fights the boss in a moment his very government orchestrated, as well as the boss whose patriotic duties were to her country that betrayed her time and time again. In her farewells, she hands the Legacy to Snake to take home.
Yes, the CIA has taken care of the boss themselves. I believe the White House will be satisfied.
Eva departs believing now that she has the real Philosopher's Legacy and in turn handed Snake a fake, until it's revealed in typical Kojima fashion at the end of the credits that indeed Eva gave the Chinese a fake, which means the boss had handed Snake in all certainty believing she handed him the real Legacy. But the truth is, Ocelot was one step ahead of them all, who replaced the real Legacy in the vault with the fake one Eva tried to steal, calculating everyone's move methodically, realising Eva's devious goal that she would most likely try to steal it from Snake if he beat the boss. Hence why Ocelot explains to the director they have Snake to thank for the ruse.
Yes, we have Snake to thank for that. Khrushchev believed it as well. Yes, they bought our story. I don't think they'll be making a fuss.
Ocelot more than likely realised during his time in Operation Snake Eater that the boss was the legendary soldier who gave birth to him in the middle of battle, when he was snatched, and the United States philosophers were responsible for both the death of his parents and resented being the pawn of their systems.
The sorrow was the father. I gave birth on the field of battle. A beautiful baby boy. But my child was snatched away from me by the philosophers.
He fabricated a story that the KGB most likely got their hands on the other half, whilst in reality he kept that half for himself to later retrieve the other half he gave to the CIA's director. Later into the series to wage war in the future against the Philosopher's Order in the future, who also become the Patriots, who of course betrayed his mother and his closest disciples to ensure that his mother's true will would live on. And of course, you guys know the rest. MGS3 truly is a brilliant spy epic inspired throughout historic events during the World Wars and leading into the Cold War, fought with proxy wars and information and ever-advancing digital technology in the decades to come that would change warfare from simple trench frontline attacks to more advanced means of nations striving for global dominance in an endless battle between ideologies. Kojima wrote his true magnum opus for the foundation that is the Metal Gear Solid series, based on non-fictional events that makes MGS a true stealth action espionage game. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below on what you think about the storytelling of MGS3 and how it resonates with you. Please consider to like and subscribe for anything in the future in-depth Metal Gear. Until we meet again.
Yes, it appears that no one knew that I was Adam. Of course, I am always at the CIA's disposal, Mr. Director.